Greetings from sunny Dallas, Texas. Welcome to another episode of Indian American Conversations. This is Nitin Harkara. Don't mess with India. Don't mess with India. This is the message that India's Foreign Minister Jaishankar delivered at the United Nations in New York earlier this week. So what prompted Jaishankar to come out with a strong message like this? To understand that better, we'll have to go back a few days. A few months, in fact. In the town of Surrey, British Columbia in Canada, there are approximately 300,000 Sikhs who have made their home in that town. The vast majority of those Sikhs are peaceful, hardworking Canadian citizens just going about their daily business. A few of them seem to be in support of an idea called Khalistan, which effectively means that these people want to carve out an independent Sikh state out of the territory, the sovereign territory of the Republic of India. One of the people supporting this idea was a gentleman by the name of Hardeep Singh Nijjar. This man was the president of a Gurdwara in the town of Surrey. He ran a plumbing business, which apparently was his full-time occupation. India alleges that this man was also involved in terrorist activities in that country. India alleges that this man was involved in the killing of many people in India. He was behind several incidents of terror in that country, and he was a wanted man in India. Now, this guy was apparently shot and killed by unidentified assailants outside the Gurdwara where he spent quite a bit of his time. This is an incident from June of this year. The assailants apparently have not been identified yet. I'm sure the Canadian police and authorities are doing their due diligence to identify these guys and bring them to justice. We don't know what the status of the investigation is so far. Now, a few weeks after this happened, Justin Trudeau, the Prime Minister of Canada, happened to visit India for the G20 summit. Trudeau got a fairly chilly reception in New Delhi. Delhi had been trying to get the Canadians to respond to dossiers that they had prepared with reams of information on people like Hardeep Nijjar and other Sikh citizens of Canada who were apparently involved in anti-India activities. This series of actions and dossiers presented by India met with no response from the Canadians. India had been trying to get Canada and Justin Trudeau to respond on this for quite some time, but so far they have had no success in the matter. Justin apparently was given a reception that he found not to his liking. Justin, in turn, also skipped a dinner at the G20 summit, and he was also not given the chance to have a bilateral meeting with Prime Minister Modi of India. This may not have gone down too well with him, and the icing on the cake as far as this bad trip to India was the fact that Justin Trudeau's plane broke down in New Delhi, and he had to wait a full 48 hours for a replacement plane to arrive from his country so that he could catch a ride back home to Ottawa. Now, soon after he landed in Ottawa, Justin Trudeau announced in the Canadian Parliament that he had what he called credible allegations that India and the government of India was behind the killing of Hardeep Singh Nijjar in Surrey, British Columbia. Now, this was surprising, and it was quite unexpected that the Prime Minister of a country would accuse another country of carrying out a killing on its soil. Now, why Trudeau would do something like this is still a bit of a mystery, but people have speculated that the Canadian media was onto something in terms of what they would have viewed as a scoop on the Niger killing. They apparently had become aware that there was intelligence on the killing that had been dug up by the Canadian intelligence agencies in cooperation with what is called the Five Eyes Alliance, which is the intelligence services of 5 countries, including Canada: the US, UK, Australia, New Zealand, and Canada. The intelligence apparently was provided by the Americans. Again, there is no confirmation of whether it was in fact provided by America or not, but it is speculated that the intelligence came from America. And American law enforcement may have had a hand in providing some of this information to the Canadians as well. Again, no confirmation on any of this. Trudeau, I suppose, did not want to be beaten to the release of this information by the Canadian media. So he went out and he basically announced in the Canadian Parliament that he was accusing India of being behind this killing. Now, there has been no support for any of Trudeau's statements in Parliament from these Five Eyes partners. The announcement in the Canadian Parliament was met with angry outrage from India, and there were strong denials from the Indian government. The Indian media basically mocked and ridiculed Trudeau for making statements like this in the Canadian Parliament. It's not surprising at all that India would respond this way, because the normal procedure in such matters would have been to conduct a quiet investigation, gather all the evidence in the matter, and then provide it to the Indians and say, hey, would you guys have anything to do with this? Yeah, that would have been the sensible thing to do. But Justin apparently thought that this was not the right thing to do, and he just went ahead and made this dramatic announcement in Parliament. Now, Canada has had a long history of supporting activists, as it calls them, in Canada, on Canadian soil, who have been demanding this so-called Khalistan in India. So this record of support for the Khalistanis goes back all the way to the era of Justin Trudeau's father, Pierre Trudeau. India had actually asked him to hand over wanted terrorists at that time in the early 1980s. And Trudeau had turned down India's request. This is Pierre Trudeau, had turned down India's request. It turns out that one of the people that India was asking to be extradited, they were requesting this guy's extradition. He later became one of the accused in the bombing of an Air India airliner, which was going from Canada, and it had over 300 Canadians on board. Now, this airliner was blown up over the skies of in the skies over Ireland, and it crash landed apparently a few miles off the coast of Ireland. So there has been a continuous record of anti-India activities in Canada, and a lot of these instances of anti-India activities have been strongly condemned by the Indian government, the Indian media, and the Indian people in general. But Canada has never felt it necessary, has never felt that it was necessary for them to respond to this. Now, most recently, India had produced some dossiers on Hardeep Singh Nijjar and a bunch of other activists, as Canada calls them. And again, there was no response to these requests from India for either extradition on these extraditing these people from Canada, or on the dossiers themselves. Once the Indian media got into the act, then basically all hell broke loose. The Indian government also responded to Canada's actions in a pretty strong manner. Canada first expelled a diplomat from the Indian embassy. This gentleman was apparently with the Research and Analysis Wing, which is the well-known intelligence agency from India. This guy was based in Ottawa, and he was apparently sent home. India responded by asking another diplomat, this time from the Canadian embassy in Delhi, to leave. And then India went a step further, and they said that because of the security issues surrounding Indian consulates and the threats to Indian diplomats on Canadian soil, that they would go ahead and close down the processing of visas for any Canadians who wanted to apply for visas to go to India. So this has been quite a blow to a lot of the people of Indian origin who reside in Canada, or even other Canadians for that matter, who want to travel to India for whatever reason, whether it's for personal reasons, for business, or tourism, whatever. So this standoff continues as we speak. And the situation hasn't changed with regard to the diplomatic spat between the two countries. There have been further protests against India outside these consulates in a couple of Canadian cities. There have been incidents of Khalistani activists burning the Indian flag, desecrating it, shouting anti-India slogans, and so on. And India is staying tight-lipped on the situation right now, not commenting too much, but they have not changed anything with the situation as it stands right now. Now, in response to these events, Jaishankar came out with a fairly strong official response. This was in addition to what has already been said by the Indian government, but although they have not said much over the last few days after they announced the closure of these Indian missions in Canada as far as processing of visas is concerned, Jaishankar's statement is the next salvo in this ongoing diplomatic war between India and Canada. So Jaishankar basically told Canada indirectly at the United Nations that the rules of the game have changed. We may have had a rules-based order so far where one set of countries made the rules and another set of countries was being asked to follow orders. So according to Jaishankar now, this is basically a different ballgame. And it's not surprising that Jaishankar would say that, because in terms of the way the situation is with India now, in terms of its economy being the third largest economy in the world, India becoming an IT superpower now, India basically being the pharmacy of the world in terms of its pharmaceutical research and development and the way it handled the COVID crisis with its vaccine, India's stewardship of the G20, and many other aspects of world affairs where India's role has changed completely in terms of how it is acting on the world stage and how it is perceived as well. Jaishankar basically suggested to the Canadians that they come up with whatever evidence they have and that he would be happy to respond, the Indian government would be happy to respond in a proper way with the evidence in hand, if Canada deigns to provide the evidence. So far, all we have from Canada are what Justin Trudeau has called credible allegations. Now, credible allegations, in my view, is a complete oxymoron. There's no question that judicial processes and investigations can be conducted on allegations, and which the allegations leading to evidence. But you cannot stand in a country's parliament and tar a different country, which is basically the largest democracy in the world now, based purely on allegations alone. So Jaishankar's message of don't mess with India, provide evidence, but don't mess with India, is a pretty strong one. And I do hope that the Canadians and the Canadian government understand that India is not to be trifled with at this point. And it is probably in Canada's best interest to try and cool tempers down a little bit and try to address this situation in a diplomatic manner as befits a country like Canada. Thank you. Good to talk to you. Jai Bharat, and God bless America. Take care.